FNaF 3 is a game with multiple unanswered questions. What was the multiple and simultaneous springlock failure? When did Happiest Day actually happen? And why did Fazbear Fright burn down? All of these questions are important in their own right, but today I want to focus on just one unanswered question from this game. Who is the protagonist? This has become a talking point in the community for about 9 years, and it's easy to see why. In every other FNaF game, we either learn our protagonist's name or we get hints to who they are. Or it's just obvious. The only outlier is FNaF 3. Well, I guess we don't know the FNaF AR protagonist either, but that is a topic for another day. For the longest time, people assumed it was either Mike Schmidt, Jeremy Fitzgerald, or someone random. Over the years, the suspects for who the protagonist could be have lengthened, and today, I want to discuss this debate and tell you who I believe the FNaF 3 guard to be. From what I'm aware, there are 5 or 6 different suspects who the protagonist is, those being Michael Afton, also known as Mike Schmidt, who is the main protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 4, 5, and 6, and arguably the secondary protagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 as Fritz Smith. Go watch my video on that after this. Hudson Foster, the main protagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, What We Found, which is based on FNaF 3. Henry Emily, who is William Afton's business partner and the cassette man from Five Nights at Freddy's 6. Jeremy Fitzgerald / Cassie's dad, the main protagonist of FNaF 2 and Help Wanted 2. I'm just putting them together because it saves time. And Sammy Emily, who is Henry's son from the Silver Eyes novels. Well, I guess it could just be someone random, but that's just kind of boring. Out of these 5, there are 3 I actually want to talk about, but I'm still going to discuss the other 2. Before we do that, let's talk about some things we absolutely know about the Fright Guard. 1. They have worked there at least one night prior. 2. They stay at the location for 6 nights. 3. They seemingly survived the fire, as the newspaper doesn't say there were any casualties. 4. Some of the phantoms who attack them are withered animatronics from FNaF 2, which may or may not be important. We'll discuss that later. This is a relatively unpopular theory, but I still see it discussed, and it's also on that theory tier list, so I thought I would talk about it. As far as I know, there isn't any actual evidence for this theory. Like, seriously, I looked, and I couldn't find anything. The only thing I could find would be the reason why he would be the guard, which is Henry told him to go there. Kinda like a parallel to William sending Michael to Circus Babies. Like I said, there isn't any actual evidence for this that I can find, so it's also kinda hard to debunk. Of course, I could say we don't have any proof that Sammy even exists in the game's continuity, but we also have no reason to think he doesn't. And also I would be a hypocrite because I think he does exist, and I think he's the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. Or at least he got up and running again. But even you could argue Sammy CEO has evidence with all the puppet imagery, while Sammyguard has literally nothing. So overall, I would say Sammy being the Fright Guard is out of the question. Jeremy has always been a suspect for the identity of the Fright Guard, and with him possibly being Cassie's dad, it's possible now more than ever. I'm going to talk about Jeremy as if he was Cassie's dad to save time, and because I think he is. This theory actually does have evidence, so we're already a step up from Sammyguard. The first piece of evidence is that Jeremy would have seen the FNaF 2 animatronics, so all the phantoms make sense under this theory, if they are important. Next is that the Fraz Wrench in Help Wanted 2 actually has the code for the Stage 01 minigame in FNaF 3, which is a pretty good connection. It also makes sense for him to work there, as Jeremy seems to be some kind of Freddy superfan, with how he collects the lunchboxes of the characters. And one of the main collectibles in Help Wanted 2 is actually action figures, which it seems like he would collect. Overall, pretty good theory, although I don't think it's true, and let's discuss why. First, the Stage 01 code. I think what we have to remember is even though Stage 01 is a minigame in FNaF 3, the minigame itself takes place at Fredbear's. The reason that this is important is because Jeremy already has a connection to Fredbear's. It's where he and his friends killed the crying child. The phantoms check out though, so like I said, not a bad theory. There just isn't much to discuss with it, and I think any of the next options are more likely. Well, that was quick. I just want to say again, there's nothing wrong with either of these theories. I would say that out of those 2, Sammy is the least likely because there's actually no evidence for him being the guard. Jeremy is cool, and with him possibly being a protagonist in the new saga, it would be kinda cool if he was the FNaF 3 guard. I just think the next 3 are more likely, and also all of them are more satisfying from a narrative perspective. Now, if those 2 out of the way, let's talk about the 3 I actually want to talk about: Henry, Hudson, and Mike. Let's talk about Henry first, because most of the Fright Guard debates come down to Hudson versus Mike anyway. I won't lie, going into this video, I thought Henry being the guard was really unlikely, but after reviewing the evidence, it actually isn't too bad, and kinda makes sense. The evidence is that Henry would have the motivation to work at Fazbear Fright, as he would likely want to keep up with things relating to Freddy's. Also, the gameplay of the audio lures explain why in FNaF 6, Henry knows that the audio would lure the animatronics. Also, he would have motive to burn the place down, if the guard did burn the place down. Overall, not a bad theory, except all this evidence can be explained away. For the audio lures, Henry built the animatronics. Well, at least the springlock suit, so he would know that they follow audio.
Yo, I just want to come in here real quick. I guess we don't know for sure if Henry built the spring locks, but there's no reason to think he didn't know how they worked, so like, yeah.
For the fire, while he would have motivation, we don't even know if the guard did burn the place down. Also, Henry being the guard kind of goes against his character arc of doing nothing for years, and then trying to fix everything after being inactive for so long. So overall, not a bad theory. More likely than Sammy or Jeremy, I think. But I think it fails from a narrative perspective. Although, we are talking about the same franchise that thought Molten MCI was a good idea, so narrative satisfaction probably isn't a good debunk. And also, if he was the guard, when he talk about it in FNAF 6, I don't know. The point is, Henry probably isn't the guard. Okay. So now we have to talk about Mike and Hudson. This is going to be kind of complicated, because just talking about these theories separately wouldn't really do them justice, because they are both good and really likely. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll talk about the evidence for both of the theories separately, and then we will compare them. After that, I have two theories that actually combine both Mike and Hudson being the guard. With that said, let's talk about... Okay, I know most of you guys don't read the books, so let me give you a quick rundown on who Hudson is. Hudson is the main protagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, What We Found. In the story, Hudson is one of 2 security guards of Fazbear Fright. Importantly, he is the night guard from 12 to 7 a.m. I think it's 7, it might be 6. In the story, Hudson is asked to be the security guard by his friends Dwayne and Barry. Around 3/4 of the way into the story, Dwayne and Barry find Springtrap. During Hudson's night shift, he goes to investigate Springtrap. Then Springtrap gives Hudson hallucinations of his abusive stepfather and math teacher. He also has a hallucination of Chica. At the end of the story, Hudson burns alive in an oven. With that said, let's go through the evidence that Hudson is the in-game security guard. First off, Hudson being asked to join Fazbear Fright would explain why at the start of the game there was no job application. Instead, the paper just announces the location opening. Also, some interpret Phone Dude's dialogue as if he were talking to an old friend, and they think he is Dwayne from the story. Also, Hudson being the guard could explain why the phantoms are burned, because in the story, Hudson does have fire-related trauma. Also, Hudson being the guard is possible as we have other stories and frights that have alternate universe versions of game-verse characters going through different narratives. For example, Coming Home focuses on the Fright's version of Susie, and we know she can't be the same version as the games because the way she is lured is completely different. In the games, William uses her dead dog as leverage for her to follow him. In the story, William instead tells her that she knows where her lost toy is. So basically, alternate universe versions of characters from the games can appear in Frights and have different stories. Another piece of evidence is this quote from the Ultimate Guide that says, "New leads, Hudson. Is Hudson the FNAF 3 guard?" In general, the events of the story seem to follow the events of FNAF 3 almost to the letter, right down to the ending. Hudson also experiences hallucinations throughout the night while dealing with Springtrap. Also, another thing, why would Hudson even exist in this story if he is not the Fright Guard? Why would Scott make up a new character? We'll talk about that later. Mike is the most common answer to who the Fright Guard is, and it's obvious why. He's the main protagonist of the first 6 games, even if you don't think he's Fritz Smith or the Fright Guard. So him being the protagonist makes sense from an overall series perspective, but that doesn't really matter. Let's get into the evidence. Mike being the guard explains the phantoms as, even if he isn't Fritz Smith, it's not much of a stretch to think that he worked at the FNAF 2 location, or maybe the Wizards got sent to William after the FNAF 2 location shut down, kinda like what Gibby said in his 8-hour-long FNAF lore analysis. Furthermore, at the end of Sister location, Mike says he's going to find William while the burned remains of Fazbear Fright are shown. Basically, the cutscene is Mike saying what he plans to do, and the visuals are the outcome of his plan. We will talk about another interpretation of this cutscene because some Hudsonguard believers believe a different interpretation of this cutscene. Mike would have the motivation to work at the location because he would be looking for William, and you have to remember, Mike doesn't know what happened to William. So, to Mike, Fazbear Fright is the only possibility as to something that might draw William out of hiding. Hell, he might even think William is behind Fazbear Fright and is investigating the place to see if he is. Also, the survival logbook literally shows Foxy acting as a security guard in the FNAF 3 location. Foxy being used to represent Mike, as seen earlier in the book with him reading the magazine from Sister location. I don't really know what else this could mean. Even if you believe that logbook takes place in 1993, or you think it takes place in between FNAF 1 or 3, or if you think it's meta. Also, something else that I actually thought of from this Reddit post is that the main antagonist of FNAF 4, Nightmare, who is likely Shadow Freddy because of the FNAF 4 files, actually shows up in FNAF 3 as an Easter egg. So FNAF 3 is most likely where Mike got the FNAF 4 nightmares. If the logbook is in 2023, you can find out more in the Reddit post link down below. Finally, and this piece of evidence is something I'm not sure about, but in The Immortal and the Restless, Clara, who represents Mike, burns down Vlad's house. Vlad probably represents William. While it isn't William's house, he does live at Fazbear Fright, so this could be evidence that Mike burned down Fazbear Fright. Okay, now let's compare both Mike and Hudson and the counter-arguments both sides use and try to come to a conclusion on the identity of the guard. First, let's talk about the logbook. I've seen some Hudsonguard believers say that these pictures in the logbook are just meaningless references, comparing them to JJ earlier in the book and also Circus Baby. Also, Jeremy's quote. I don't know how Jeremy's quote is a pointless reference, but whatever. Personally, I have to disagree with this. Even if these are just references, that doesn't mean necessarily everything else in the book is. And even if these pictures are just references, what are they referencing? The fact that Mike is the Fright Guard?
Hey guys, I actually just want to jump in here real quick. I took a second look at the logbook photos and I realized something. The logbook office is actually has some differences from FNAF 3. And they're not some like minor differences either. First of all, notice in the FNAF 3 office, there are these two vents. That's not in the logbook office at all. Also, something that's probably more important, the actual box of characters. Notice how they're like different characters there? Like they're the same, but they're different. This just made me think, like, what the fuck? Is this point invalid now with the Mike thing? Because I've done some research online, right? Because I can't think for myself. I did some research online. I saw some people saying, like, I guess there's like a theory that, A, this doesn't matter, which I would think would be weird that they would purposely change that. What I like more is the idea that this is what the FNAF 3 office is actually based off of, these logbook pictures. And yeah, I'm gonna get back to the fucking Fright Guard in a minute, don't worry. I like the idea that these are based off of, this is what the FNAF 3 was based off of, right? This in the logbook is actually a storage facility. But then I was thinking about that, right? I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but what does that mean for fucking Mikeguard? So I'm just gonna explain this, how this can still work. Foxy in the, what looks like the FNAF 3 office, even if it's not, is still supposed to represent Mike in what would like, in what the FNAF 3 office would soon be based off of. I think now, like, I still think the logbook takes place in 2023, like the main events of it. And yeah, even the spirits. I see some people arguing about the spirits online. I don't really know how to explain those unless like those writings appeared earlier, like when the logbook was first made, and then Mike wrote in it in 2023. And another thing, I see people say that since the logbook doesn't have any, since Mike doesn't reference FNAF 3 in the logbook, that it can't be, but you gotta remember, there's not really anything for him to reference at all about FNAF 3, because, well, I'll talk about it later in the video. I think if Mike is the guard, the logbook takes place during his first week at Fazbear Fright, or like the week before the main game starts. So he won't even have anything to write about, but that's just like my cope. So that's just what I'm saying for this, because I know someone's going to bring it up in the comments. So yeah, pretty much logbook thing still valid, even if the logbook office is different. So yeah.
Another piece of evidence I commonly see to use to debunk Mike being the guard is this Afton line said in FNAF 6.
You may not recognize me at first, but I assure you, it's still me.
It has been said this means Mike wasn't the FNAF 3 guard, because why wouldn't he recognize Springtrap? But guys, come on, look at them. We have people who still think they're completely different characters.
Springtrap is Burntrap, but is not Scraptrap.
Also, William is even saying that Mike wouldn't recognize him. He's just saying it's a possibility. You know why he's saying that? Because they look entirely different. It's not like we know for sure if Mike recognizes him or not, because he doesn't get a say in the matter at all. Also, if we really want to use FNAF 6 lines as evidence, let's take a look at another Afton line.
That was easier than I thought it would be.
This line implies that William has tried to kill Mike before, and it was challenging for him. Or at least he knows what Mike is capable of. We have no reason to think William knows what Mike has lived through. Even if you believe he sent Mike to work at FNAF 1 and 2, he still wouldn't have known how difficult those nights were. The only time he would know for sure is if Mike was in FNAF 3 and he gave him a hard time trying to kill him. Although I guess Mike did survive Sister Location, which William sent him to, most likely knowing he was going to die. But even then, he wouldn't know if Sister Location was challenging for Mike or not, because he wasn't there. Now let's talk about the Sister Location cutscene. Some see this cutscene as Mike saying he's going to come find William after Fazbear Fright already burned down. And like, I can't really disprove this. It's an interpretation of the cutscene. I don't think it's true even if Mike is the Fright Guard though, because if this was true, Sister Location would have to be during or after FNAF 3, and that's something I don't think is true. You can see why in my Sister Location timeline video. Next, let's talk about Phone Dude's dialogue. Like I said earlier, Phone Dude talks to the guard as if he knows them, and it's possible that he's Dwayne from what we found, so he would be talking to his friend, Hudson. The thing is, I don't see his dialogue as him talking to a friend, I just see it as him being friendly, which is absolutely possible. He's just talking to his co-workers as just being friendly. That's just how I see it. Also, I don't even think Phone Dude is Dwayne, even under Hudsonguard. This is because Phone Dude is all excited about Fazbear Fright, while Dwayne is just working there for money until he goes to the Navy. He even makes fun of Fazbear Fright in the story. Although, that could just be him trying to comfort Hudson, as Hudson is scared of Fazbear Fright. Another thing I see is the fact that the phantoms are burned must mean that Hudson is the guard because of his fire-related trauma in the story. But literally, Phone Dude says this on the first night.
Like, the attraction opens in like a week, so we have to make sure everything works and nothing catches on fire. And trying to make the place feel vintage, we may have overdone it a bit. Some of this equipment is barely functional. Yeah, I wasn't joking about the fire. That's a real risk.
He brings up the possibility of a fire twice. This means whoever's the guard is most likely paranoid about the place lighting on fire during their shift, and that transfers into their hallucinations. This isn't even necessarily a Mikeguard thing. This goes for all the other suspects too. Now let's talk about Hudson debunks. The main debunks I see is that we don't even know if Hudson exists in the games. I already explained that this isn't really a good argument. Coming Home shows that we can have characters from the games in Frights, but have totally different stories. This alone deals with most Hudson debunks. But another common debunk I see is that Hudson is actually a Mike parallel. So let's talk about that real quick. Is Hudson a Mike parallel? Let's go over how Mike and Hudson are similar. First off, they both accidentally kill a family member. With Hudson, it was his abusive stepfather, and with Mike, it was his younger brother, unless you believe Mike victim. I actually think the story implies that Hudson didn't accidentally kill his stepfather, but I don't remember. I think it was still an accident, actually. I don't remember. Someone please tell me. I genuinely forget. Also, they are both night guards for a Freddy-related establishment. However, that's where their similarities end, because in the book, Hudson is a social outcast after he kills his stepfather. Mike is still pretty popular even after his brother's death. I mean, this guy had people coming out of their houses just to wave to him. Also, Hudson was someone who was bullied as a kid, and Mike was a bully. However, does this disprove them being parallels, or is it just characters having different characteristics? Well, I don't know. I can see both sides. Let me know what you think. Now back to Hudson debunks. The final Hudson debunk I see is the Phantoms themselves, and how they are FNaF 1 and 2 animatronics. So I guess I should talk about the big question. Are the Phantoms important to the identity of the Fright Guard? Here's the thing, in what we found, it is shown that the Phantoms are hallucinations that are made by William Afton that uses past trauma. So, the fact that the Phantoms are the Wizards from FNaF 2 is trying to tell us something. I 100% believe that. Why? Well, because in the story, Hudson only sees visions of stuff he experienced. His abusive stepfather, an old math teacher, and also Chica, who was already creeped out by earlier in the story. And while in the games, the toy animatronics can be explained as there's a box of them in the office, and the puppet is literally there. Chica being from FNaF 1 can be explained as her FNaF 1 design can be seen in-game. You know what can't be explained under Hudsonguard? Withered Freddy and Foxy being Phantom variants. Okay, maybe Freddy can be explained from the Shadow Freddy Easter egg, but Foxy can't be. And no, damaged animatronics can't explain them as they look completely different. One is the classics, one are the Wizards. The only people who could have seen the Wizards are Jeremy, Fritz, Henry, and Mike. We debunked Henry and Jeremy, and I think Fritz is Mike, so I think that Mike is the Fright Guard. And it's not just because of the Phantoms. You see, I believe that the identity of the Fright Guard was an intentional mystery. I think this because Scott absolutely could have added a paycheck over the newspaper in the ending, but he didn't. You have to remember that FNaF 3 was supposed to be the last game, so Scott not revealing who the player is, to me, says that he left it as a mystery for us to solve. And also, another thing was that Scott described FNaF 3 as being a personal experience.
As I was working on part 2, I knew that 3 should be a very personal experience. It should be the opposite of what 2 was. You know, part 3 should be kind of one-on-one, and I knew that part 4...
If Hudson is the Fright Guard, there's nothing personal about this game. Hudson and Springtrap are acquaintances. Who would be the most personal guard to go up against Springtrap? Probably his son, who's been hunting him down for years. Back then, I think Mike Schmidt was just investigating Freddy's to find the killer, and finally found him after so many years, still making it personal. Also, let's just talk about the Phantoms again real quick, because I know some people who believe Mike isn't Fritz are gonna say that Mike couldn't have seen the Wizards, even though the Phantoms themselves kinda disprove this. Notice how the Phantoms have minor design differences compared to the Wizards. Freddy has lost his leg, and Foxy has lost his hook. To me, this implies that Mike saw the Wizards in a different state than they were in FNaF 2. When? I don't know. If William got the Wizards like I said earlier, that would explain it, but that is just speculation. So now, before we talk about the two theories where Mike and Hudson both are the guards, I just want to say that Hudsonguard is still a good theory and very possible. I just think the evidence from Mike is better, so I think he is the guard. Also, even if Hudson is the guard, I still think Mike did burn down Fazbear Fright, mostly because of the Immortal and the Restless cutscene, but also because I don't think Fazbear Fright burned down just because of faulty wiring. If it did just burn down because of that, Scott wouldn't have mentioned the possibility of it being foul play. Furthermore, I think the Fright Guard probably has something to do with Happiest Day, but that is something that can be debated, and I don't want to go into that debate right now. Also, Mike and William's first and final confrontation being in FNaF 6, where William is just a normal enemy, is pretty unsatisfying. FNaF 3 is basically one long boss fight, with the knights acting as stages which get progressively more difficult. It is much more satisfying from a story perspective and gameplay perspective if Mike was the one who went through this boss fight. Not really evidence, and it doesn't matter to whether or not Mike is the guard. That's just something I wanted to throw out there. The only thing that makes me think Hudson might be the guard is, why does he exist in the story if he is not the Fright Guard? And what about the ultimate guide? Well, about the first thing, I thought about that for a while, and then I realized something. FNaF 3 is Scott's favorite game, or at least it's one of his favorites. So I think that makes sense for Scott to go, well, I need to write a short story for this book series, but I'm running out of ideas. Oh, I know, let me make a story based off my favorite game. Wait, but then when I confirm who the protagonist is? That is a debated topic. Oh, I know. I'll make up a new character, implement a new Fazbear Fright. I'll also have him die on night 3 to show he couldn't be the guard in FNAF 3. Instead, I'll use this story to explain the Phantoms. Sure, they're never gonna show up again. Heck, I'll even make the Phantoms in this story different from the games to further show how this guy can't be the guard. Surely no one will misunderstand my intentions. That's just what I think. I mean, you could use FNAF 3 being Scott's favorite as being evidence for him to reveal that Hudson is the guard. And about the Ultimate Guide is already wrong here. The ending from what we found is much different from FNAF 3. The only similarity is a fire, but even then, it's not even really, it's just an oven. So it's possible that they are also wrong about Hudson being the guard, and they don't say it definitively anyway. I am just looking at it from a biased perspective because I believe Mikeguard. I just want to throw that out there. With that said, let's discuss these two theories. What We Found Games is a theory that states that the short story What We Found takes place in the game's timeline as a prequel to FNAF 3. Before we discuss it any further, I want to say I did not come up with this theory. My sources for information on this theory will be in the description. From what I can tell, this theory spawned from the description of Fazbear Fright in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story Pressure. In Pressure, the Fright location's description resembles What We Found more than FNAF 3 itself. In case you don't know, the What We Found version of Fazbear Fright is basically FNAF 1 combined with FNAF 3. In Pressure, the reason for this is that the Fright location is based off of the in-universe video game, which means that our FNAF 3 is not the same as the in-universe FNAF 3. Even though Help Wanted kinda goes against this, whatever, it's so weird. So this theory is that the video game version of the Fright is based off of the What We Found version, because unlike the FNAF 3 version, it doesn't burn down in the story, so Steve could use it as inspiration for his games, or Fazbear Entertainment could send him photos of it to use as inspiration for his games. So pretty much the story is, Hudson dies on the first night of FNAF 3, where for us the player nothing happens. Phone Dude's calls would be pre-recorded. His first night call would be before Springtrap is found, and his second one could actually be in real time, although it might still be pre-recorded. After Hudson dies, the Fright crew moves Springtrap to the FNAF 3 Fazbear Fright, and everything goes as normal. Pretty good theory, I think. There are some problems with it though. One, it is not stating either FNAF 3 or What We Found that there are multiple Fright locations. And second, Hudson's death is not mentioned in FNAF 3 at all. Although, you could interpret Phone Dude's sudden exit from the game as him not being able to call Mike anymore because of the investigation of Hudson's death. So besides those minor issues, I think this theory is overall pretty solid. So this is a theory I actually came up with. At least, I think. I haven't seen anyone else talk about it. I'm sure someone has thought of something similar. Under this theory, both Hudson and Mike work at Fazbear Fright. What inspired this theory for me is how in What We Found there are actually two security guards, Hudson and Virgil. Virgil is described as being an old man, and I think Virgil is supposed to be Mike or a Mike stand, because remember, in 2023, Mike would be in his 50s. Something else that made me think this is the very first page of the logbook. On the page, Mike's name is written, but is crossed out with a sticky note reading, "Looks like someone already wrote in this. You don't mind, right?" This means the logbook was given to someone after Mike used it. I've seen some say that this could be written after Fazbear Fright burned down, and that the logbook was sold at the auction at the end of the game, which I think is possible, but I think the logbook being given to the next night shift guard makes more sense. Hell, if you really want to stretch it, you could say we play as both Hudson and Mike. Play as Hudson for the first 2 nights, and then switch to Mike night 3 and onwards. This works if you think Dwayne is the Phone Dude. For the first 2 nights, he's calling his friend, and after night 3, he doesn't bother because he doesn't know Mike like that. Oh, so Mike already listened to Phone Guy 30 years earlier, so his main calls being phone guys would be really cool. I think it has to be night 3 where Hudson gets replaced, because that's when Phantom Freddy starts to appear. And as I explained earlier, he is a hallucination of Withered Freddy / Golden Freddy. So I think the story under this theory is that Mike was the original night guard when the place was first being worked on. At some point, Hudson joins the crew and replaces Mike as the night guard for a week or 2. Then Springtrap shows up and Hudson is like, what the fuck is this shit? He survives the night, and when he and Mike are switching, so Hudson is leaving and Mike is entering, he tells Mike about Springtrap, and Mike is like, that's weird. If it's really stressing you out, we could swap hours. And then they do. I'm not sure how long it would take for their shifts to be switched, but judging from how Fazbear Fright is kinda amateurish, I think it's possible for their shifts to be switched within the day or the day after. I find this theory to be really satisfying as it fixes my problem with the narrative under Hudsonguard. The only problem I can think of is that most of it is pure speculation, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And with that, we have come to the end of this long video. Hopefully I was able to get it out for the 9-year anniversary. I just want to say that all of these theories have merit, and it's okay if you guys don't agree with me and think the guard is someone else. Sorry that this video was so long. If you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe for more videos. They probably won't all be this long though.